Hello, fifth grade. I'm Dr. Delosier, and I'm excited to find out what happens with Ben. Do you think he's going to adjust to his new place? Do you think Mrs. Tibbetts is going to find out what he did with the snakes? Do you think Ryan and Danny will be upset that he didn't go to the birthday party? Let's find out. Today, we will be determining the theme of a story from details in the text. We will analyze how the characters respond to the challenges they face. We will be successful by completing a story sequence. You will need your journal or notebook and pen and pencil to take notes as we read. We are also going to be generating our own questions as we read. We will use context clues and details to help generate thoughtful questions. We will be successful as we reason how these questions help us better understand the text. Yesterday, we read chapter 6. We are going to go ahead and create the graphic organizer now for chapter 6 to help us review what happened. Our characters in chapter 6 were Ben and Mrs. Tibbetts. The setting was in Mrs. Tibbetts' yard. The first event was that Mrs. Tibbetts told Ben not to go near the snakes. The second main event was that Ben remembers that he skipped Danny's party and overhears Mrs. Tibbetts get in an argument. The event 3 was when Ben wanders over, and shakes the cage a little. Then he pushes a stick into the wire. Event 4, Ben denies that he was bothering the snakes. Let's continue reading with chapter 7. Chapter 7. On Monday morning, everyone's talking about Danny's party. It seems like the whole school was there. Ryan comes up to Ben right before the beginning of reading. "Why weren't you there?" Ryan asks. "You said you were coming." "I had to do something else," Ben says. "You promised." "I didn't exactly promise. I just had to go somewhere else." "Where?" Ben didn't answer. He wished Ryan would give up and go away. "Where'd you have to go that was so important? You said you were coming to the party." "I had to do some work for Mrs. Tibbetts." "Mrs. Tibbetts?" Ryan frowns. "Mrs. Tibbetts the teacher?" "Uh-huh. What kind of work?" "Just yard work." "You worked for a teacher?" "What's wrong with that? She paid me more than I ever made for yard work before. Anyway, she'd already talked with my mom and I couldn't get out of it." That seems to satisfy Ryan. He probably still feels hurt, but he does go back to his desk without asking any more questions. Ben is relieved. Ryan will forget all about Danny's party in a day or two, and things will go back to normal. How do you think Ryan felt about Ben not going to the party? And why do you think he felt that way? Did Ryan change how he felt after he talked to Ben? Why or why not? At lunch, Ben sits down at a table across from Jenny. Before he could even take a bite of his pizza, though, Frankie comes over with his tray and glares at him. "You missed the party so you could go to Mrs. Tibbetts' house?" he says, making it sound like the dumbest thing he's ever heard of. Ben shrugs. Ryan sure didn't waste any time letting everyone know. So much for things getting back to normal. "Mrs. Tibbetts is a loser," Frankie says. "What were you doing at her house?" Everyone at the table, even Jenny, is staring at Ben. He feels his face turning red. "She's okay," he mumbles. That's not what he wants to say, but who's going to admit that he likes a teacher and would rather be with her than skating with kids his own age? "Yeah, right," Frankie snorts. "She's okay if you like crummy teachers. She's old and she's wacko." She is not. She knows a lot, says Ben. She knows a lot about science. Then why is she teaching in that little room? Frankie fires back. It isn't even a real science room. They had to put her somewhere because they can't fire her. If she's so great, how come Mr. Nickleby is always checking on what she's doing? I'm going to pause for a minute. Do you think Frankie is upset about Ben not going to the party? I don't either. I don't think he's upset about that. I wonder why he seems so upset that Ben went to Mrs. Tibbetts' house. And how did he find out? Let's read on. At first, Ben doesn't know what he's talking about, but confronting Mrs. Tibbetts, and he remembers Mrs. Tibbetts sticking the frog in the principal's face. Frankie looks at him in disgust. Well, Danny sure is mad. Instead of coming to his birthday party, you go and hang out with some old teacher. He rolls his eyes and heads toward another table. Jenny takes a bite of her sandwich. If you ask me, she says with her mouth full, Frankie's the one who's a wacko. A couple of kids laugh. Ben looks up and smiles at her. It won't solve his problems with Frankie, but it sure helps to have someone on his side. Frankie says that Danny is mad. Do you think Danny is mad? I'm not really sure I believe that. If Danny is so upset, why isn't he talking to Ben himself about it? I'm thinking Frankie just wants to create some drama. He seems to like drama, doesn't he? I want to pause for a minute. Do you see this little frog right up at the top of the page? Several times on the pages we have been seeing this, and I wanted you to tell me, why is that frog there? That is correct. I'm glad you remembered the author's signal. Let's see what's going to happen. It's a new setting. On the playground, Ben sits with his back against the brick wall, watching Frankie and Danny and a bunch of other boys playing basketball. Since Ben is big, kids are always asking him to play, but he doesn't really like basketball, especially not today. He knows he should say something to Danny about the party, but it's not going to be easy. As they all come up the walk after the bell, Ben catches up with him. Hey, Danny, I'm sorry I wasn't able to come to your party. I'm sorry Who cares? Danny says, pushing past. Ben stands there on the walk as other kids rush around him. That evening, right after dinner, Ben asks his mother if he can go to call Ty. That evening, right after dinner, Ben asks his mother if he can call Toby. He wants to talk to somebody, especially somebody who doesn't live in Massachusetts. Toby answers the phone after only one ring. Ben can hear laughing and yelling in the background. Hello? Toby shouts. Toby, it's me, Ben, Snake Man. Knock it off for a minute, guys, Toby says away from the phone. I'm trying to talk here. Ben hears some scuffling, then Toby's voice again. Hey, Ben, how are you? Okay, Ben says. Another round of loud laughing. You should be here now, Toby yells. Everybody's eating dinner here. Ben feels sick. Great, he says. Who's there? Josh and Bill. Oh, and Larry. Larry? Larry Dunstan? Yeah, too bad you're not here. But Larry's such a jerk. Ben feels terrible the moment he says this, but Larry had always driven him and Toby crazy. No, he's okay now. We're on the same soccer team. Why did Ben call Toby? What parts of the text reveal the reason? Don't forget to go back to the beginning of this chapter to help find support also. Let's go on. You're playing soccer? Ben asks. Toby's never played soccer before. Yeah, we had practice this afternoon and we're all on the same team. So my mom just brought us back here to eat. Ben hears another shriek in the background. His heart drops through his shoes. How's Lanny? He asks. Okay, eating and sleeping. Ben has had enough. Fine, he says. Guess I gotta go now. Me too. Talk to you later. Ben listens to the phone click. Everything stinks, he says to himself. Absolutely everything. He puts on his raincoat and takes a flashlight from the drawer in his kitchen. So when Ben calls Toby, he begins to feel sick. Why does he feel that way, and what kind of sick is it? Give text evidence. His mother is at the kitchen table working on some papers. She looks up. Where are you going? I just want to go out for a little while, in the back. His mother looks at him for a long moment. Okay, she says finally. Don't go out for too long, and don't go too far away. He slips out the back door and down the steps. The porch light shines out across the backyard. A fine mist is falling. Ben can barely feel it. It makes the air foggy and damp. He remembers someone saying that fog is just a cloud low to the ground. He likes the idea of walking through a cloud. The light in the sky is fading, but it's not quite dark yet. He heads down the path through the woods, hardly aware of where he's going. I don't have a single good friend in Massachusetts, he thinks. My best friend is hanging out with a kid I can't stand. Everybody thinks I'm an idiot for going to a teacher's house. He walks until he reaches the marsh, where the trees open up a little and there's more light from the gray evening sky. They're already calling. Ben stands with his flashlight off. The sound is of his breathing loud under his hood. His mind is racing in a million different directions. Beep, 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 beep. I have a question for you. Based on the conversation that Ben just had with Toby, what's similar about Toby's new friend compared to maybe Ryan, the boy that wants to be Ben's friend? Do you think the similarity is important to the theme of the story? Why or why not? And if so, how? Let's go on. Beep, 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 beep. He takes a deep breath, lets it out, and listens. There are 3 or 4 calling, but it's hard to pinpoint exactly where the calls are coming from. The voices seem to hover in the air, filling the space over the marsh. Almost more of a presence than a sound. More join in. They seem to call and answer each other, get closer and closer together in time, then join, calling together. Then they separate again, singing back and forth, again and again. Ben stands transfixed, feeling like he's in a trance. He's in the middle of a huge living machine, a pulsing thing. The peeps are the heartbeat or motor, the engine of life. It surrounds him, calling out louder and louder. He forgets all about school and Frankie Murley and Tucson and Toby. A peeper sings close to his foot at the edge of a small pool of water. Ben bends over carefully without turning on the flashlight and sits back on his heels, waiting. His hands and feet are getting cold, but he doesn't move. The soft gray world is filled with the sound of the peepers, and then he hears a trill above the other sounds. It must be the American toads calling out too, high and steady, a backdrop for his nearby peeper song. He's afraid to turn on the flashlight, afraid he'll stop the music, afraid he might somehow stop the world. He strains to see in the growing darkness, trying to make out the little creature that is only inches away from him. It's no good, though. He can't see it. Finally, he points the flashlight toward the spot the sound seems to be coming from and switches it on. A circle of bright white light shines on a tuft of grass. The singing continues. He keeps looking, but he can't see the peeper. The singing stops. Did it get away? He stares harder. Then he sees it clinging with its tiny toes to a broad blade of grass. Its eyes sparkle in the light. Life pulses in its pale throat. Ben grips the flashlight in one hand, holding his breath. The peeper stays where it is. With his other hand, Ben reaches out, slowly, carefully, trying to get closer. Then he grabs for it. Gotcha, he says. He can feel its hind legs pushing hard against his palm. He drops the flashlight so he can cup the frog in both hands, and the beam of the flashlight shoots up into the darkening sky. He really can't see what he's doing, but he manages to get a hold of the peeper behind the hips so that he has it firmly but gently between his thumb and finger. Then he picks up the flashlight and trains the light on the frog. The peeper has stopped struggling and seems to have calmed down. Its back legs are hanging down. Its throat is moving in and out. And then, for a minute or two, or maybe 10, he doesn't know how long, Ben studies the frog, holding it carefully between his fingers. He thinks about taking it to school. Ben! Ben! His mother's voice calls out through the night, over the sound of the frogs and toads, over the pounding of his heart. He opens his hand. For a moment, the peeper just sits on his palm. Then it springs out of his hand, out of the circle of light, back into the night. Ben turns the flashlight off, stands up, and listens. Ben! Coming, he calls, and he starts back. He doesn't turn the flashlight on. He knows his way home. How does Ben find comfort after a day that it didn't go well? Do you have a place you usually go when you've had a bad day? Does it help to go there? What do you do? How did Ben find comfort? At the beginning of this lesson, we completed a sequence chart for Chapter 6. We identified the main characters and the setting. Then we identified 4 main events that occurred in Chapter 6. Your assignment is to do the same for Chapter 7. If your setting changes, please note that, but it may not change. Please identify at least 2, but the higher level skill would be to identify 4. I know you can do this. You've got it. Make sure that you complete the chart. You may create your own sequence organizer, or your teacher may have posted it on Seesaw to do your work. Make sure you record the events in the order they happened. That's what makes it sequence. So go back to your text. You probably took notes. Go back to your text, find your events, and then make sure, like I said, that you record the events in the order it happened. That's sequence. I can't wait to read with you again and find out what happens. Do you think Ben will figure out how to accept his new environment and make new changes? I'll see you next time.